This is Luke from Emo Electric, and we're here today to do a comparison between Torqeedo and ePropulsion. We're going to talk about all of the motors that these companies make, 5 horsepower and smaller. Above 5 horsepower will be a video for another day, and we're excited for this one. There's no other video out there we're aware of that compares the new Torqeedo motors to the ePropulsion motors, and one that's not biased. We are biased in that we want to sell you an electric outboard because we believe they're so much better than gas, but we sell Torqeedo motors, we sell ePropulsion motors, and all the time we get asked, which one should I buy? Who makes the better motor? And there's no short answer to that question. There's great features about the Torqeedo, there's great features about the ePropulsion motors, and which one you decide to buy depends on you and your boat and your use case. So we'll break that down for you today. We're going to run through all the features of these motors, what we like about them, what we don't like about them. Then we're going to take all these on the water and give them a try, test out speed, range, and hopefully at the end of this, you'll be able to decide which motor is best for you. So we'll start off with a little overview. The ePropulsion E-Lite is a 1.5 horsepower, 500 watt electric outboard. It is less powerful, but also lighter and less expensive than all the other motors we're going to talk about today. If you're looking for a motor in that size range, the E-Lite's the way to go. Torqeedo does not make a 1.5 horsepower electric outboard, nor does anyone else that we're aware of at least. Next up, we've got the ePropulsion Spirit 1.0 Plus and the ePropulsion Spirit Evo. As you can see, they look very, very similar, and they are. They use the same battery, the same motor, same prop. The Spirit is kind of the base model, and then the Evo, or the Spirit 1.0 Plus, is kind of the base model. The Spirit 1.0 Evo is a little bit higher end, costs a little bit more, but has some extra features. We find that the 1.0 Plus is the best choice for a lot of boaters with its built-in tiller, but especially for sailors, the Evo is a nice choice because not only does it work with a built-in tiller as we have it set up now, but it also works with a top mount throttle or a side mount throttle. The side mount's wired, and the top mount you can either wire or connect via Bluetooth. You can lock the motor in place with a pin, so if you're a sailor, you can use the boat's rudder to steer, but you can also get the remote kit, which allows you to hook it up to a Teleflex steering line. Both of these motors are 1 kilowatt or 3 horsepower equivalents. Next up, we've got the Torqeedo Travel S and Torqeedo Travel XP. The Travel S is 1.1 kilowatts or about 3 horsepower, and the Travel XP is 1.6 kilowatts or about 5 horsepower. Other than their power output, these motors are basically identical. The motor on the XP is a little bit larger, but in terms of all the other features, they're exactly the same. For runtime, we'll run through this now in terms of what the manufacturers tell us, and then we're going to test this again on the water later on. But with the XP, you get about 47 minutes of runtime at full throttle. With the Travel S, you get about an hour or a little bit less at full throttle. The Spirit Evo and the Spirit 1.0 Plus have the same exact runtime at 75 minutes at full power. And then finally, the E-Lite has a runtime of about 45 minutes at full power. It's important to keep in mind that actual runtime depends on a number of factors, including the hull shape, the weight of the hull, how many people are in the boat, and the sea state, right? Wind, current, things like that. So we'll run through the prices of these motors. Bear in mind that these prices are changing pretty quickly these days with the tariff situation, so these prices may change. If you go to the product page for each of these motors, you'll see the up-to-date pricing. So the ePropulsion E-Lite is priced differently in short shaft and long shaft. In short shaft, it costs $1,149, and in long shaft, it costs $1,249. The ePropulsion Spirit 1.0 Plus retails for $2,999. That includes the battery, motor, and the built-in tiller. And the numbers that we're discussing here are for the whole package. The ePropulsion Spirit 1.0 Evo retails for $3,606. That's with the tiller or the top mount throttle. The side mount throttle is slightly more. The Torqeedo Travel S retails for $2,998. And the Torqeedo Travel XP retails for $3,998. In terms of additional batteries, it's not possible to buy an additional battery for the ePropulsion E-Lite because the battery is built in. A Travel XP battery costs $1,749. The Travel S battery costs $1,349, as does the Spirit Battery Plus, which is used for the Spirit 1.0 Plus and Spirit Evo. So all of the motors that we're comparing today weigh about the same with the exception of the ePropulsion E-Lite. The E-Lite weighs 17.4 pounds in total. The motor itself weighs 14.7 pounds and its bracket weighs 2.7 pounds. But since you never really have to handle both at once, the weight you're dealing with is about 15 pounds. The ePropulsion Spirit 1.0 Plus in short shaft weighs 42.6 pounds in total with a 19.2 pound battery and a 23.4 pound shaft. The ePropulsion Spirit 1.0 Evo weighs 44.1 pounds in the tiller version and 42.6 pounds in the remote version in total. The shaft weighs 24.9 pounds in the tiller version and 23.4 pounds in the remote version. And the battery is the same as the Spirit 1.0 Plus battery, which is 19.2 pounds. The Torqeedo Travel S weighs 44.5 pounds in total. Its shaft weighs 22.5 pounds and the battery weighs 19 pounds. And finally, the Torqeedo Travel XP weighs 49 pounds in total. Its shaft weighs 28 pounds and the battery weighs 21 pounds. And keep in mind, for all of those numbers, we're talking about the short shaft version. The long shaft version weighs a pound or two more. So now we'll talk batteries. The ePropulsion E-Lite has a built-in battery. It's 378 watt hours, and there's not really anything you can do to extend your range with the E-Lite. You cannot power it with an external battery. So if you need to be able to extend your runtime beyond 45 minutes at full power, the E-Lite might not be the best choice. With the ePropulsion Spirit 1.0 Plus and the ePropulsion Spirit 1.0 Evo, they both use the same battery, the Spirit Battery Plus. This is a 1276 watt hour battery. What we love about this battery is that it also floats in case you drop it in the water, which is not the case with the Torqeedo battery. Taking this battery on and off is pretty straightforward. You just have one power cord there that will unplug. And then we lift up with this blue handle, lift up on the handle on the back, and it slides right off. To install the battery, you'll line up those grooves in the battery with their corresponding part on the motor, and it slides right in. The first couple times you do that, it might be a little bit awkward, but you get the hang of it quickly. Then to connect it, you just want to make sure you line this up. Don't push and twist. Figure out first where it goes, and then that screws right in. Oh, we're a little bit off there. There we go. And it's as easy as that. And again, the Evo, same exact battery, same exact way to install it. With the Travel S and the Travel XP, these batteries are 1080 watt hours and 1425 watt hours. So the XP battery has higher capacity, but the dimensions of the batteries themselves are identical. So it's just more cells on the inside. Of course, the XP battery weighs a little bit more. And what's neat is you can use the XP battery with the Travel S if you want more runtime than the Travel S battery provides. One of the things we love about these new batteries is the lack of cables to make the connection. So when we take that off, we see there's a port on the battery and a port on the motor. And to install it, we just slide it in, drop it down, push it forward, And that is not only physically connecting the batteries, but it's making the electrical and the data connections as well. So a few more notes on batteries. Talked about how you can swap the XP battery into the Travel S if you want longer range on the Travel S, but the Torqeedo motors are not compatible with third-party batteries or larger Torqeedo batteries. So you're either Travel S battery or Travel XP if you have the Travel S, and for the XP, the only option is the XP battery. With the ePropulsion Spirit motors, on the other hand, you have a lot more flexibility. Now we find that most people just go with the Spirit battery for the Spirit motor. It floats, it's portable, lots of great reasons to use it. But if you want more range, you can use a third-party battery or an E-Series battery from ePropulsion. In order to do that, you'd need to buy this third-party battery cable. So you can see it just connects to the power cord coming off the motor on one end, and then it has a positive and negative ring terminal coming off of the other end. And then you hook that up to a third-party battery of your choice. You can also get the cowling here. So this is just for aesthetics. You don't need it, but if you are going to use a third-party battery or anything but the Spirit Battery Plus, the cowling makes the motor look a lot nicer. All of the electric outboards that we're talking about today come stock with a standard AC charger. One end plugs into a wall outlet, the other end plugs into the motor. The standard charger for both Torqeedo Travel motors and both ePropulsion Spirit motors is a 180 watt charger. It takes about 8.5 hours to fully charge the Spirit Battery Plus. It takes about 6 hours to charge the Torqeedo Travel S battery and about 8 hours to charge the Torqeedo Travel XP battery. The E-Lite charges in about 4 hours on the standard charger. All of these motors can be charged with solar or 12-volt chargers, which are sold separately. And the ePropulsion Spirit Battery Plus also has an AC fast charger that reduces the charge time down to 3.5 hours. The E-Lite and Torqeedo motors do not have a fast charging option. If you've enjoyed this video so far and you do decide to buy one of the electric outboards that we talk about in this video, we'd appreciate it if you buy it from us. We'll link all of these motors in the description of the video. Head over to our online store. We ship everywhere in the continental US and typically for free, and we price match other Torqeedo and ePropulsion dealers. And if you found this video helpful, please subscribe to our channel. It goes a really long way. It helps make these videos possible. So now we'll talk about the displays of all these electric outboards. So first up, we have the E-Lite. And right now the E-Lite's powered off. And one of the nice features is you don't even have to turn the motor on to know your state of charge. You just tap that button and it pops up. To power the motor on, we're just going to hold that button. And then we'll give it a second. And now it's showing us our power output in watts, which is 0 because the motor's not running. It's also showing that we're in neutral. That will change to forward or reverse if we go into forward or reverse. And then down here, that little icon that's flashing is telling us that our kill switch is not in. If we press this button, power output in watts will change to our state of charge, which is currently at 100%. Next up, we have the Spirit 1.0 Plus. This motor will give us real runtime data, as will all the motors here with the exception of the E-Lite. Right now it's at 9:59, the motor's off, but we'll see once we're on the water later that depending on our power output, that number will change, depending on our power output and our state of charge. It will show our power output in watts there, and then our state of charge is in these icons here. There are 10 of them, so it will round it to the nearest 10%, and that little icon tells us that our kill switch is not in. We can also see our voltage if we press the select button, but most people prefer to just take a look at the state of charge, but you can also see the voltage there if you'd like. Now the Evo tiller has a slightly richer display. Again, we're being told that our kill switch is not in. It's giving us our runtime remaining in hours. Again, it's not on, so it's not really telling us much now. and it can also tell us how long we've been running for. Our state of charge is given out of 100%, not those block icons like the 1.0 Plus. And then we can see our power output in watts down there. Next up, we have the Torqeedo Travel. So this display is exactly the same on both the Travel S and the Travel XP. And there's a few different screens here. So on this one, we can see our speed in knots, which is 0 right now, our state of charge, which is 100%, our RPMs, and our power output in watts. If we click this button here, click that one, we can see similar information, but now the main number is our power output in watts. Then we have our speed, state of charge, and RPMs. And then finally, this is the screen that I prefer. This gives us real runtime data in both nautical miles and minutes. And then we've got our state of charge out of 100, our speed in knots. You can change that to miles per hour or kilometers per hour, power output in watts, and RPMs. Now, one thing that the Torqeedo has that the ePropulsion motors do not is a built-in GPS. That's what gets you your speed there. It's GPS speed, and you don't have that with the ePropulsion motors. So now we'll talk about the tillers on these different outboards. So again, Travel S, Travel XP, same exact tiller. Torqeedo made some great improvements to it when they updated these motors last year. So the motor kind of locks down, or excuse me, the tiller locks down right here. It can come way up, almost 90 degrees. And then when you bring it back down, it'll stop there. But if you press this lever, it will come down, and it can go down even a little bit further if it's not off of the stand, or if it's not on the stand or a transom. Another great feature with this Torqeedo tiller is that you can adjust the friction for raising and lowering it by adjusting a machine screw right here. Now the Evo tiller comes on and off of the motor, right? So you can take it off if you're going to use the side mount or the top mount throttle. It also raises up, but not nearly as high as the Torqeedo tiller. And then to lower it, you pull it out and then push it down. Right now you can see it's hitting that, but maybe we'll spin it around. And you can see that it goes straight down, but it doesn't go all the way towards the motor. To lift it up, you go like that, and it locks right into place. But there's no way to adjust the friction for raising and lowering it. So if I lift it up, it just drops back down. The Spirit 1.0 Plus tiller, very similar, except this one's built in, but it works the same way. Pull it out and push it down to lower it. And then to pull it up, you raise it up like that, but it doesn't go up very high, doesn't go up quite as high as the Evo tiller and not nearly as high as the Torqeedo tiller. For most boaters, that probably doesn't matter, but depending on the transom of your boat, especially for sailors, it might be really nice to have a tiller that can stay angled up a little bit. Finally, the E-Lite tiller, a little bit different from all of them. It is extendable. So if you press this button and pull out, you can extend the length of your tiller. Right now it's locked in place there. If we want to change the tiller angle, we'll pull this blue lever out, and then we can lock it at an angle there. We can lock it all the way up. And then what's really nice about this tiller is if we take the motor off of the stand, we can turn it all the way down and then carry the motor by the tiller. So for the ePropulsion E-Lite and ePropulsion Spirit 1.0 Plus, the only option for steering and controlling your speed are their tillers. Both tillers are built in, but for the ePropulsion Spirit Evo and both Torqeedo Travel motors, you have a few different options for steering and controlling your speed. So for both of these motors, you can get a remote kit that allows you to hook them up to a steering wheel, or you can lock them centered and use the sailboat's rudder to steer. The Torqeedo Travel S only comes in a tiller version off of the shelf, and then you can buy the remote kit later to switch it out. Whereas the Travel XP, you can buy off the shelf in a remote version or with the tiller. We don't have the full remote kit with us here today, but we do have the TorqLink throttle. So this is the throttle that you would use in lieu of the tiller. And to swap them out, we just pulled out these little rubber caps. You can see that exposed a bolt here. So you take that bolt out, put in the cover there, and then hook up your throttle. Not terribly difficult, but you do need a couple tools, and it does take a little bit of time. On the other hand, with the Spirit Evo, you actually have two different remote throttle options. This is the side mount throttle. It also comes with this screen here. And keep in mind that this must be hardwired. This is not wireless, but it's a great choice if you have a permanent install in your boat and you want to mount it to the side. I'll put that down for a moment. We also have the top mount remote throttle. This works with a wire connection or a Bluetooth connection. So it's a great choice if you don't want to have to deal with wiring anything to your boat. And the other thing that we like about ePropulsion and this side of things is that it's very easy to swap out the tiller and the Bluetooth remote throttle. You just take this pin out, it unscrews by hand, and then we're going to undo our communication cable there. And that's it. So if you have the remote kit, there's a piece of plastic that goes in here, has a metal pin that drops down that hooks up to the steering system. And then if you want to wire the top mount, or if you have to wire the side mount, that just plugs in right there. So for some boaters, being able to lock your motor centered is an important feature, especially for sailors. The E-Light, you're not able to lock this motor centered, at least not really. You can move the tiller down and put it in the middle there so it can't move around, but there's no design that allows you to fully lock this motor centered. That being said, you can adjust the steering friction. You can see on this motor it doesn't, well, maybe you can't see, but I have to push it decently hard to get it to move. So if I take my hand off that tiller while we're underway, this motor should stay in place. On the Spirit, it's not possible to easily adjust your steering friction. So these motors turn more easily if you take your hand off the tiller. And the only way to lock your steering centered is by putting this pin down in here. So you have to take your battery off to do this, which can be kind of frustrating if you're on the water. But once that pin is in there, the motor can't move. If you remove your pin, put your battery back on, the motor can move. Now, one of the things that's a little bit frustrating about that is when you go to raise your motor up, the battery is heavier than the tiller and the motor wants to turn upside down. It's not the end of the world, but it can be a little bit frustrating, especially if you're dragging your boat up onto the beach and now the prop is close to the sand, or if you're towing it, although both of these manufacturers recommend that you take these motors off of your transom if you're towing your boat, be that on land or in the water. Torqeedo, on the other hand, made some really great upgrades to locking and unlocking your steering when they revamped these motors last year. So instead of the pin, like the old Torqeedos and the ePropulsion motors, you actually adjust your steering with a lever on the back of the shaft here. So right now, this lever is all the way down, which allows this motor to turn 360 degrees. But there's actually 3 positions here. If you move this all the way up, that locks this centered. And if you bring it down to the middle, Now you can only go 60 degrees on either side before the motor stops. And that's nice because when we raise this up and it wants to fall because of the battery, it only goes over to the side 60 degrees. Another great feature that Torqeedo added when they revamped their motors is making it easy to adjust your steering friction. If you come behind the motor here, you'll see that there are 2 machine screws with Allen heads back there, and tightening or loosening those will either tighten or loosen your steering friction. So on my sailboat, I have this set up with the steering friction a little bit tighter. So if I want to take my hand off the tiller for a minute, the motor will stay locked in place. So when it comes to tilting your motor and trim positions, Torqeedo is the clear winner here. When they updated these motors last year, they made some big improvements to it. You can do a few different shallow water tilt angles. We've got one there, one there, one there. Now we're probably out of the water here. And when this motor is all the way up, it's fully 90 degrees. So even if your transom's angled back a little bit, this should be totally out of the water. With the Spirit motors, you're either all the way down or all the way up. The max trim angle on the Spirit Evo is 85 degrees. And then the max trim angle on the Spirit 1.0 Plus is 75 degrees. Finally, the E-Light does have multiple trim positions. Lift that lever up there. And it does have one shallow water angle in the middle. And then it does also come all the way up there to about 85 degrees. So looking down the line here, you can see the difference in the max trim angle between these motors. Keep in mind the XP has the same trim angle as the Travel S. This may or may not make a difference to some people. One important thing to keep in mind is if your transom is angled, your max trim angle will be lower. So if you do have an angled transom, then the ePropulsion Spirit Evo or one of the Torqeedo motors might be a better choice to ensure that the pod and the motor and the prop totally out of the water when the motor's all the way up, or if you're pulling your dinghy up on the beach, you're not worried about this hitting the sand. Now, one other feature that all of these motors have is the ability to lock and unlock your tilt trim. So we'll show you how that works on the Torqeedo first. Right now, this is unlocked. So this lever, we pull it up and back. And so now, in the event of a grounding, the motor will kick right on up. If you run aground with this locked, you're much more likely to damage your motor. The Spirit has a similar function here. We just get into it a little bit differently. We're going to lift this lever up, pull this pin, release the pin, and then now the tilt is unlocked. It's important to note that if you go into reverse, your motor will lift up. So make sure if you're using reverse that your tilt is locked. But if you're in shallow water and you're just going to be in forward, make sure it's unlocked in case you do run aground. Finally, the E-Light, same thing, just a little different to lock and unlock it. We're going to pull this up, slide this blue lever back, and now our tilt is unlocked. And if we do the opposite there, our tilt is locked. So now we'll talk a little bit about corrosion protection and zincs. So the Torqeedo Travel XP and Travel S has a few anodes. There's one that goes on the prop shaft there. And then there are two, or actually three, on the bracket here. There's one on each side, and then one that's up under there. It's probably kind of difficult to see. But it's important to note that the shaft anode on these Torqeedo motors comes stock in aluminum. And that's the best choice if you're using this motor in fresh water. If you're using the motor in salt water, you should not use that aluminum anode and you should purchase a zinc anode instead. Same exact thing on the Travel S. On the ePropulsion Spirit Evo and 1.0 Plus, we also have a number of zincs, but on these motors, they come stock as zinc anodes, not aluminum. So they're set up to use in salt water right off the bat. If we raise this motor up, we'll be able to see some of the zincs. So we've got one on the prop shaft, just like the Torqeedo. There's also one on the front of the pod here, down below. And then we have a couple that are higher up. We've got one on the base of the clamp there, and then one on either side down below there. Now, zincs aren't the only important thing about protecting your motor from corrosion. I'll also talk about the caps to the different power cables. And this is one of the most common points of failure on all of the electric outboards that we sell, the connection points between the motor and the battery. So we'll start off with the E-light. And what's great about the E-light is that the battery is built in, so there aren't any connections to make when you go to use the motor, but we do still have two ports on it. We have our charging port. This is on a spring there, so if I let go, it snaps shut, creates a nice seal for the charge port. And then we also have a USB-C output here that you can use to charge phones and other small devices with a USB cable. But they both have good solid caps. This one is rubber, you just kind of squish it in there, then it creates a nice seal. On the Spirit 1.0 Plus and Spirit Evo, we have a cap for our power cable, and I really like this one. It seals nicely, it twists on, and it's so important that when you're not using this, you leave this cap connected. On the battery, we've got a cap for the power cable and a cap for the charging port. And then on the Travel S and Travel XP, we have a cap on the battery for the charging port. Seems to stay in there pretty well. It's just rubber, you press it on there. When we take the battery off, one thing we can see is that there's no cap, no cover for the port on the battery, which we do not love. But fortunately, on the motor, there is a cap for that connection, and this is a great little design. Just pop it on when you're not using the motor, and then pop it off when you're going to put the battery on. And if you look closely here, you can see that there's dielectric grease on these connectors, and that comes from the factory at Torqeedo, which we really like. Now, dielectric grease, if you put too much on there, it can hurt these connections, but a little bit helps prevent corrosion. The ePropulsion motors do not come with any dielectric grease on those connections. We recommend putting a little bit on there or just a little bit of WD-40, but maintaining those connections and making sure they're corrosion free is the most important, or one of the most important aspects of maintenance with these electric outboards, and really corrosion protection in general. Keeping those contacts clean and rinsing these motors with fresh water after use and salt is the most important thing you can do to ensure that your electric outboard lasts for a long time. In terms of maintenance, all of these electric outboards are very similar in that there is next to no maintenance. A lot of times these manufacturers will throw out that there's truly no maintenance. There's always a little something, but compared to a gas outboard, there's very little that you have to do to maintain it and keep it working well. So the most important thing is keeping the contacts clean and rinsing the motor with fresh water after it's been used in salt. Talked about this a little bit earlier, but a little bit of WD-40, dielectric grease on those connectors, and just keeping an eye on them, make sure they're free from corrosion, will help avoid what's really the most common issue with these motors, which is connection corrosion in those connectors between the motor and the battery. In terms of rinsing the motor with fresh water, best thing to do is spray the whole thing off. Obviously don't shoot it into the charging ports and things like that. And we'll show you how you can turn the shaft of the motor and spray out the inside of the shaft. That's true for all these motors except for the E-Lite. They have a hollow shaft filled with salt water so that the shaft doesn't float, thus the motor stays down. But when you take the motor out of the water, you want to even rinse out the inside of that shaft. Another thing that's worth thinking about is your battery. So these are lithium batteries. They don't last forever. And your charging practices have a lot to do with how long they'll last for. So best practices for all of these motors are the same, which is to not leave them fully charged or almost all the way discharged for an extended period of time. Batteries like to sit around the 50% mark. Over the winter, recommends that you charge your battery to about 50-60%, depends on the motor. And all of the manufacturers will say to check it every 3 months. You just turn it on, check to see what your state of charge is. For the E-Lite and the Torqeedo motors, you want it to be around 50-60%. They might have recommendations that are slightly different, but somewhere in there. And then the Spirit battery actually has a really cool function where it goes into this deep sleep mode. So in deep sleep mode, the battery will still self-discharge, right? It loses charge just sitting there, just like your phone or any other lithium battery, but that rate happens very, very slowly. And it goes into that mode when the battery discharges down to 60% and it hasn't been used in a while. And if your motor is in that, or your battery is in that deep sleep mode, it won't work when you plug it into the motor. You have to wake it up by plugging it into the charger. So that's a great feature on that Spirit battery that the E-Lite and the Torqeedo motors don't have. But as long as you're checking it every 3 months, you shouldn't have any major issue. Now, if you do need work done on your motor, which is not particularly common, but these things aren't indestructible, they do have issues arise. It's a little bit different between Torqeedo and ePropulsion. So right now, at least, every ePropulsion dealer also is required to service the motors. Now, depending on where you live and what your local dealer is like, that might be great, might be a little bit difficult, but all the service runs through dealers and there's no way to directly call ePropulsion. They work under a US distributor, and then there are dealers under that distributor that do all of the service. So quality of the service varies from dealer to dealer. Torqeedo, on the other hand, does have an American branch, Torqeedo USA. You can call them, speak to them directly, or talk to a dealer. But not every Torqeedo dealer also services the motors. There are specific Torqeedo service centers that will service the motors. So you might live close to one, you might not live close to one, but it's worth taking a look into both of those things for ePropulsion and Torqeedo, where your nearest dealer or service center is. So that way, if an issue does arrive, you don't have to worry about mailing your motor. That's certainly possible. We do it all the time, but these aren't particularly cheap to ship. So another thing that's worth considering when you're choosing which electric outboard to buy is the warranty period. On the ePropulsion E-Lite and Torqeedo Travel and Torqeedo Travel XP, that warranty period is 2 years no matter what. With the ePropulsion Spirit 1.0 Plus and Spirit Evo, you get an extra year on top of that 2 years if you register your product with ePropulsion, which only takes a minute to do online. It's super easy, no reason not to. So essentially, you're getting 3 years with the 1.0 Plus or the Evo, and 2 years with the E-Lite, Travel XP, and Travel S. All of the electric outboards we're discussing today come in different shaft lengths, and it's important to figure out the ideal shaft length for your boat. We have other videos on this topic, and ePropulsion has a great blog post on it as well, which we'll link in the video and in the description. For the ePropulsion E-Lite, it comes in 2 shaft lengths, short and long. The shaft length in this video is the short shaft version, which is actually adjustable in 4 positions between 11.1 inches and 15.8 inches. The long shaft version is adjustable between 17 inches and 21.7 inches. The ePropulsion Spirit 1.0 Plus comes in 3 different shaft lengths. The extra short shaft is 20.7 inches, the short shaft is 24.6 inches, and the long shaft is 29.5 inches. The other 3 motors here, including the Spirit 1.0 Evo, Torqeedo Travel S, and Torqeedo Travel XP, each come in a short and a long shaft version, and the measurements for those three are all the same. The short shaft measures 24.6 inches, and the long shaft measures 29.5 inches. So a few more features that are worth noting, one of which is ePropulsion's technology that stops the prop in the event of an impact. So we're going to put this on a very slow speed. I don't recommend trying this, but you'll see if I put my hand here, the prop actually stops. With the Torqeedo motor, that does not happen. See, the prop just wants to keep going there. In the event of an impact, that technology can help prevent damage to your prop and your motor. While we're on the subject of props, both propellers from both manufacturers are very similar. They're plastic, they have a shear pin inside. We highly recommend getting an extra prop for either motor, because if you break it, if you have one on hand, you're only off the water for a couple of minutes. If you don't have one on hand, then you've got to order one, and you can't go to West Marine, you can't go to a marine store, you have to get them from a dealer. So that's super highly recommended item to buy when you purchase your motor. A few other notes on the lower units themselves. You can see that the lower unit on the Travel S is a little bit larger than the lower unit on the ePropulsion Spirit, and then actually the lower unit on the Travel XP is a little bit bigger than the Travel S, just because it's housing a bigger motor inside of there. Now we're going to lift these up and show you a few more things. So if you look at the pod of the Torqeedo motor, you can see that this fin down here is made of plastic and it is removable. So that may be designed to be somewhat sacrificial. In the event of a grounding, you'd just be breaking that piece, which you can replace, and not anything more. The other thing about the Torqeedo housing is that it's not all metal. This front part is metal, but the entire housing, there is some plastic in there. Whereas on the ePropulsion motor, the entire housing is metal, which we really like. Assume it would be more durable than one that's partially plastic. And the skeg is also metal and built into the motor itself. So if you run aground with this, you're much less likely to break the bottom of the motor. That being said, in the event of an impact, you may be better off breaking your skeg or breaking your prop rather than ramming this into the ground. So they both have their advantages and disadvantages, but in our opinion, I think we'd rather have all metal lower unit housing down there. All right, so we're out on the water and we're about to start testing out all of these different motors, and we're going to see what speed they give us and what their runtime is at 25% power, 50% power, 75%, and 100%. The only motor we aren't really going to be able to get real runtime data for is the E-Light, because it doesn't display that information, but we'll see what we can do on runtime there. So right now we've got the Torqeedo Travel XP. That's their 5 horsepower, 1.6 kilowatt electric outboard, and it's going at about 400 watts or about 25% throttle. Our speed right now is 3.6 knots, and our runtime at 100% state of charge is 3 hours and 45 minutes. So not too bad of a speed at only 25% throttle. And for reference, we're on a 19-foot sailboat. It's a Flying Scot, weighs about 1,000 pounds. We've got 2 people in the boat, and then we've got 4 of these motors, which is another probably 200 or 300 pounds or so. So these numbers will vary a little bit from boat to boat, but should give you a general idea. So now we're going to bump power up to 50%, and we'll see what our speed and our range is like. So now we're at about 50% power, or just over it. We're at about 870 watts, and our speed is 4.6 knots on Navionics, and it's the same on the Travel XP. and we're at an hour and 30 minutes of runtime. So one thing to keep in mind with the XP is that a lot of times, at least on a boat on this side, you really don't need full power. You know, plenty of range, plenty of speed, less than full power. Now we'll bump it up to 3/4 throttle. All right, so our run time is down to an hour and 13 minutes, and our speed here is up to 4.9 knots. So not a huge difference between half and 3/4 power there. And now finally, we'll do our full speed test to see where we get with the Travel XP. All right, so we're at full speed with the Travel XP. We're doing 5.1 knots, and we've got about 45, 46 minutes of runtime. Keep in mind, we're down to 95% battery now. So from the start, we probably would have been 47, maybe 50 minutes, right about what Torqeedo recommends. And we do notice we're putting out a little bit of wake now. The prop is cavitating just a little bit. This is really more power than we need just to go a nice slow speed, right? We barely gained anything from 3/4 power. That just seems a lot more comfortable for this boat. Bumping it back down to about 3/4. Again, we're only lost 2/3 of a knot, and our motor sounds a lot more comfortable. Run time's bumped up a little bit. So let's try the next one out. All right, so next up we have the Torqeedo Travel S. That's their 1.1 kilowatt, 3 horsepower electric outboard. Right now we're cruising along at 25% throttle, or about 250 watts, kind of jumping between 230 and 250 here. Our run time is 4 hours and 18 minutes at 100% state of charge. And our speed, according to the motor, is 2.6 knots. And according to Navionics here, we're kind of 2.4, 2.5. So there's 2.6, so similar all around. Now we're going to bump this up to about 50% power, or just over 500 watts. All right, so at half power here, we are at 540, 550 watts, so we're right on the money there. Our speed has increased to 3.6 knots, according to the Torqeedo, and our run time is just above 2 hours. Looks like 2 hours and 2 hours and 1 minute, or 7 nautical miles. And you can see all of that in that screen, right? It's nice to have that display in both miles and hours and minutes. And it looks like, according to Navionics, we're at 3.5 to 3.7 knots. So very similar between the two there. Now let's check out 3/4 throttle. All right, so at 3/4 throttle, we're at 800 watts. So we're just a little bit above 3/4, but it's hard to get it exactly where you want it there. Our run time is now an hour and 14 minutes. And our speed is 4.2 knots on the Torqeedo and 4.2 knots on Navionics. So let's see how she does at top speed. So the first thing I notice is that we're not getting any cavitation issues like we had with the XP. So the motor is not fighting to push this boat past its hull speed. It looks like we're topping out at 4.6 knots on Navionics and 4.6 knots on the Torqeedo. And our run time, 53 minutes at 98% charge. So we're talking about a lot of numbers in this video, and while a video is a great form of content to show you all of this, if you're deciding between the motor and you want to see all that nitty-gritty yourself, head over to our website. We have a page dedicated to comparing Torqeedo, ePropulsion, and other electric outboards, and that'll let you see all of that data next to each other and make the best decision for you. All right, so next up, we've got the ePropulsion Spirit Evo. We're actually not going to try out the 1.0 Plus on this boat for the purposes of speed and range, because it's exactly the same, right? Same motor, same battery. The difference just has to do with the display, tiller versus remote throttle, things like that. But all the runtime data will be exactly the same, as well as the speed. So right now we've got this motor putting out about 25% of its full power, or 245 watts, right? This is a 1,000-watt motor. Our runtime is about 5.5 hours, and our speed seems to be hovering right around 3 knots. Right now we're at 3.1 knots. We're totally relying on the on Navionics for this, because remember, we don't have built-in GPS, built-in speed to the ePropulsion motor. So let's kick it up to 50% throttle and see where we end up. All right, so we are up to 50% power. We're at 502 watts, and our runtime right now is about 2 hours and 40 minutes, and our battery is at 99% state of charge. Looks like our speed has jumped up to 4 knots. Now, one thing to keep in mind is it's pretty calm out today, so if you're fighting wind, fighting current, all of these speeds will be a little bit lower. And that is when the XP is particularly nice to have. It'll help keep your speed up in the wind and the current and the waves. So now we're going to bump this up to 750 watts. All right, so it's hard to get it right at 750, but we're at 763, so right around 75% power output. Our runtime is 1 hour and 41 minutes, and our speed has jumped up to 4.4, 4.5 knots. So not a huge gain in speed. You see that the runtime drops pretty significantly. So if you're ever on the water with your electric outboard and you're worried about runtime, just bring your speed down a little bit and you should have plenty. So now let's turn it up to full throttle and see how we go. All right, so our speed seems to be hovering about 4.7 knots. I saw 4.8 a minute ago. That's at 100% power. We've got 1 hour and 15 minutes of runtime, or 75 minutes. That's exactly what ePropulsion says in their data, so it's good to see that that's accurate. And we might actually even have a little bit more because we're down to 96%. So if we're at 100%, we'd be just over 75 minutes of runtime. So one thing that I've been reminded of being out on the water with these motors is the noise. So there's a bunch of videos on YouTube where people test the noise levels and you can really hear it. We aren't set up very well to do that out on the water today, but it seems to me like the ePropulsion motor is a little bit quieter than the Torqeedo motors. It's not a huge difference. They're both super quiet, especially compared to a gas motor, but it seems to me like the Evo is just a little bit quieter than the XP or the Travel S. One other very minor detail here that's just become apparent to me today is that it's a little bit easier to precisely control your speed with the Spirit compared to the Travel motors. Trying to get these motors at exactly 25% or 50% or 75% of their power output was a little bit trickier with the Torqeedo throttle. A little bit easier with the ePropulsion throttle, easier to kind of fine tune it. That probably doesn't matter to 99% of people who own these motors, but if you're concerned about trolling at a really specific speed, the ePropulsion motor might be a better choice. All right, so finally we've got the ePropulsion E-Lite. That's their 1.5 horsepower, 500 watt motor. One thing to keep in mind for this test is that we are using the short shaft version of the E-Lite. The long shaft was just released a week or two ago and we haven't gotten our hands on one yet. So if you hear a little bit of cavitation, that's because we should be using the longer shaft. Speed might be a little bit different with a longer shaft length. We're a little bit too high, which probably brings our speed down ever so slightly, but we should still get the gist of it here. So right now, our power output is 126 watts. That's just about 25% throttle, right? It's a 500 watt motor. And our speed here is 2 knots. Now remember, with the E-Lite, we don't get real runtime data, so we're not sure how long the motor would run at this speed. The only way to test that would be to run it until the battery goes down and time all of that. Unfortunately, that's not in the cards for us today, but let's bump this up to 50% power and see what kind of speed we get. All right, so here we are at just over 250 watts or 50% power. And our speed, according to Navionics here, is 2.7 knots, hovering kind of between 2.5 and 2.7. So not too bad for 50% on the E-Lite. And again, we'd expect, according to ePropulsion, that we'd get about an hour and a half of runtime at this speed. So now we'll bump it up a little bit more. All right, so now we are at 373 watts, so right around 75% power output. And our speed has jumped up slightly. Looks like we're around 3 knots there. There's 3.1. It's kind of been hovering between 2.9 and 3.1 there. So finally, we'll see what our top speed is like at 100% power output. So there we are, sitting right around 500 watts. We'll give the GPS a minute to catch up here, but looks like our top speed with the E-Lite is 3.4 knots. Oh, little glitch there, comes back. Oh, there's 3.5 knots. So obviously a lot slower than the other motors that we tested today, but keep in mind it's only 500 watts, right? So big difference in power output there, also big difference in the weight of the motor, the portability of it, and the price. So not bad for the little guy. All right, so we don't have real runtime data on the E-Lite, but we're gonna do a little test here to see how accurate ePropulsion's runtime data seems to be. So we just hit 90% state of charge a few seconds ago, and I started a stopwatch on my phone here. So we're gonna see how long it takes to use 10% of the E-Lite's battery, and then we can extrapolate that to get a runtime. It should be about 4.5 minutes, but let's see how it goes. All right, so we've just used up 10% of the battery on our E-Lite. Let's come over here, check our timer. Looks like we're at 4 minutes, 38 seconds. Now we're down to 79%. So it looks like about 4.5 minutes to use 10% of our battery. So that's pretty similar to what ePropulsion says of about a 45-minute runtime if we extrapolated that to 100% state of charge. Maybe one day we'll get out here when we have 45 minutes to see if it really runs down that quickly, but should give you an idea that their runtime data is pretty accurate.
When we look at the data from our tests, we can see that it is very similar to what both Torqeedo and ePropulsion advertise. One of the interesting takeaways is that although the ePropulsion Spirit has a motor that is 100 watts less powerful than the Torqeedo Travel S on paper, it actually produces a higher speed than the Travel S at every power output we tested. It also has more runtime, although this is not a surprise as it has a higher capacity battery. We can also see that while the Torqeedo Travel XP moves the boat faster than the Travel S and the Spirit, this difference isn't as significant as one might expect between a 3 and 5 horsepower motor. Keep in mind that these tests were done in calm conditions, and we'd expect the difference in speed to be more significant in windier and wavier conditions. We'd also expect a greater difference in speed if these tests were performed on a larger, heavier boat. We'd recommend the Travel XP if you do have a larger and heavier boat, but for a small dinghy or small sailboat, Travel S or Spirit is probably the better choice.
All right, well, we hope you have found this video helpful and that it's explained some of the differences between Torqeedo and ePropulsion. You really can't go wrong with either if you're coming from a gas outboard. These things are great. I can't imagine using the gas outboard on this sailboat anymore. But like we've talked about in this video, each manufacturer has distinct advantages to their motors. Now, depending on your horsepower requirements, the decision might be pretty clear. If the E-Lite is enough power for you, it's hard to beat the price point, the portability, and the weight of that motor. If you need that extra power that the Torqeedo Travel XP provides, that's the way to go. But if you're stuck between which 3 horsepower or about 1 kilowatt electric outboard to buy, some of the key advantages to both companies are in the ePropulsion realm, the remote throttle capability for the Evo. If you're a sailor like I am, it's really nice to have that control in your cockpit and not have to go all the way back to the tiller to steer or adjust your speed. We also really like the metal motor housing in the ePropulsion Spirit. Just feel like it's more robust, less likely to get damaged in the event of an impact. There's also a larger support network. Every dealer provides service. You're not limited to those service centers that Torqeedo has. Moreover, that floating battery, if you do drop it in the water, save you $1,000 or so, definitely goes a long way. You typically get more, well, you do get more range with the ePropulsion Spirit Battery Plus and the Spirit than you do with the Travel XP, the Travel S. Finally, ePropulsion has generally been a lower cost supplier. The whole tariff situation in the United States might be changing that right now, but at least historically and presumably if our tariff situation normalizes a little bit, ePropulsion will be a little bit less expensive for their accessories as well as their motors. And finally, in the ePropulsion camp, we've got the ability to extend your range with larger ePropulsion batteries or third-party batteries, which you don't have with Torqeedo. So that was a lot about ePropulsion, but a lot of great things about Torqeedo too. We really love their new tilt mechanism, the fact that you have different tilt angles, not just all the way up, all the way down. If you're boating somewhere shallow like we are here on Merchants Bay in New York, a couple inches can make a big difference. So I'm sure ePropulsion will be putting that in their next motor, but for now, Torqeedo is the one that has that. And not only does it have the shallow water tilt angles, but that highest angle being 90 degrees, all but ensures on even boats with an angled transom, or even if you have a shaft that's a little bit longer than ideal, that your prop and the pot of the motor will stay out of the water. We also really like the ability to lock and unlock the steering, especially as a sailor. If I need to move away from the tiller for a minute, I can lock that motor super easily. I don't have to take the battery out and put that pin in and out like I have to do with the Spirit. Also being able to prevent the motor from turning more than 60 degrees, so that way when it's up, the battery doesn't want to spin down, is a really nice common sense feature. Another big advantage of the Torqeedo is the lack of cables that connect the motor and the battery. We expect that will lead to fewer warranty claims and fewer issues with the connection between the motor and the battery, and also just makes your life easier when you're attaching the motor to the battery, taking it off as well. And finally, the display of the Torqeedo tiller, and the tiller itself, going further up, further down, being able to adjust the friction there as well as the steering friction. But the display on the tiller itself is just a lot richer than the display on the Spirit motor. It is a color display and just has a few different options for what you're looking at compared to the ePropulsion motor, and has that built-in GPS, so you can see your speed right on the motor, which might be important to some people. And then finally, one thing we haven't talked about is the Torqeedo app. Kind of works like a chart plotter. You can see your past trips, and that's a nice little feature for some boaters. And that about does it. So if you have any questions on these motors, please leave a comment below. If If you decide you want to buy one, we sell all of these in our online store. We ship everywhere in the continental US, typically for free, typically same or next business day. And we would certainly appreciate your business. Have fun out there and happy electric boating.